this talk tonight is actually the third in a series of 4 educational webinars that we're putting on, sponsored by the North Coventry Township Environmental Advisory Council. So we've got tonight's, and then in about a month from now, we actually have one more that's titled Hawk Identification for Beginners. It'll be given by Vince Smith, who's the president of the Valley Forge Audubon Society, and it'll be a tutorial on how to identify hawks, especially hawks in flight. So thank you for that. I'd also like to thank our North Coventry Township manager, Erica Batdorf, who has been instrumental in helping to set up many of the logistics for this, and our Board of Supervisors, who have been very supportive of the EAC doing this program. So with that, Kim, I will turn it over to you. Kim White is actually a neighbor of mine, and she is going to be giving us a presentation titled The Hidden Lives of North Coventry's Frogs and Salamanders. And I know Kim is very well positioned to know a lot about our frogs and salamanders. Kim, thanks for agreeing to do this. And like I said, I will monitor for the questions. And at the end of your talk, I will try to relay those to you.
Okay.
All right.
I hope this is both educational and entertaining.
All right. Thanks, Kim.
All right. So I call it The Hidden Lives of North Coventry's Frogs and Salamanders because you would have no idea that these little creatures lived with us unless you actually saw them. And usually you only see, especially these 2 on the screen, a wood frog and the spotted salamander, right when they're migrating. So we'll talk about more about that later. But I wanted to preface this webinar with, I am not a scientist, I'm actually a teacher. I'm a reading teacher. So what I know, I have learned on the computer and just from reading and just learning. Different people, different herpetologists have come up to see the vernal pool, which we'll talk about more, and have taught me things. So what I've learned is just, so this is not, if you want to learn more, you'll have to go to a real herpetologist. I'm just a teacher who took it all in, and I'm teaching you about these hidden lives. All right, so it all began. Next slide. Okay, the year was 2005 with a new house and 7 acres of land with a swamp attached. So my kids called this the swamp that you're seeing on the screen. You can see some geese back there and some cattails kind of falling over. It did look like a swamp, and it's really called a vernal pool or a highland marsh. And what that is just a big, I describe it to my kids as a big puddle, and it gets dried out, or it can fill up, and it's not even there's no source of the water besides rainwater and snow that melts. I thought there would be like some kind of underground little spring that came up, but that's not where it all comes from. And it's also this vernal pool, we live on St. Peter's and Wells Road on the corner. So if you were to turn onto Wells from St. Peter's, if you come down just a little bit, we're on the left-hand side, and you really wouldn't even know it was there unless it was night and it was migration time and you heard everything, and then it can be deafening. So why is a vernal pool and wetlands so important? Because there's no fish. And if there were fish, all of the salamander and the frog eggs would be eaten. So that's why it's important that vernal pools are protected, and why we keep it a vernal pool and we don't fill it in and make it a pretty little pond or anything, because we don't want fish there. So we just keep it as a big puddle, and it dries up every few summers. We were really hoping it would dry up this year, and I'll tell you more about that and the other different kinds of frogs that also eat eggs that have been living in there, but it hasn't dried up since, we think it's been about 3 years. So we're hoping for a dry year this year. So we bought the land for our house, and we found this sign on the side of the road on a telephone pole or a tree. And I think this is actually the sign that we saw. So we were walking along Wells Road, house wasn't built yet, and we saw this sign, and I was like, what is that? And then we happened to see in the newspaper an article, and it mentioned St. Peter's and Wells Road and this big migration and the salamanders and how exciting it was. So kind of fell into this hidden lives of the frogs and the salamanders. So that March, so we moved in January, and that March we found out what the sign meant. So we have an explosive migration, which means all at once, all of the wood frogs, the spotted salamanders, and some of the Jeffersons just all of a sudden migrate down into the vernal pool to breed and to lay their eggs. And they all stay maybe a week or two. They breed, they lay their eggs, and then they go back out. So they don't stay in the pool. So those 2 weeks, it is deafening in there when you hear the wood frogs. So get outside, and Wells Road is fine because it's not traveled too much, but out on St. Peter's Road, when we saw what was going on, and there were already some volunteers, not my organization, but there were people that had seen this happening other years and had come out to help. They were crossing St. Peter's Road to get into the vernal pool on Wells Road. So there was a lot of things getting squished, and it was not pleasant. So I volunteered with the other organization for 2 years, and you can see there's a salamander down here, a spotted salamander, and you have to have a flashlight, which we'll talk about the conditions of this. And then there's a little girl with a spotted salamander. And I also wrote some notes so I don't forget anything. So this other organization did stay in business for, I guess, about 2 years. I say business casually. Then I took it over after the leader of their organization moved, and I tried to make everything kosher with the township and make sure everything was done right with asking permission and things like that. So then I am now the volunteer coordinator. So I've been doing this since we moved in 15 years ago, and I've been the volunteer coordinator for 13 years. So I put some pictures of my darling little baby boys when they were still darling baby boys. Here's Colin with a wood frog, and then Brendan helping to put the salamanders in. And I have to say, a little note, they don't help anymore. They're now 16 and 20 and could care less. They were a lot more fun when they were kids. But it is a great way to come out and show your children, teach them about ecology and habitats and amphibians and all that great nature stuff. So this very unique phenomena only happens when the weather conditions are just right. So this is the vernal pool, our vernal pool in the winter. So as soon as we get a thaw or a frost, which is usually late February or early March, then things start to happen. So as soon as it's warm enough, things begin to happen. So the temperatures have to be above 35-ish. I see I forgot to leave a space there, or maybe there shouldn't be a space, but it's cold. So it can happen when it's pretty cold. And it has to be raining. So if you're thinking about what the conditions are like, it is not conducive for humans. The amphibians love it. It has to be dark. So it usually happens about 20 minutes after sunset. And the big explosive migration is about 3 or 4 nights that I will call the volunteers out. I just have an email list, and I use that to call the volunteers out to help. But yeah, 3 or 4 nights. So they come in maybe 2 nights and they leave another 2 nights. And it's happening more often, but a lot of times it happens when there aren't cars on the road and we don't have to worry about crossing them. So the big problem is getting them across when cars are coming at the same time. All right. Oh, and they're coming from across St. Peter's Road up from French Creek State Park, and they're traveling down into the vernal pool. And they can travel, I know the spotted salamanders can travel a half a mile, and the wood frogs can go 0.6 miles, and I couldn't find any information on how far the Jeffersons come, but they come to breed and lay their eggs. All right, so these are the explosive, this is the big explosive migrators, and like I said, it's just those 3 that come at that time. The first one of the three is the wood frogs. So here I have a picture of a male, I believe, and these are my pictures, almost all of them. There are a few I couldn't get, like a spring peeper, because they're so tiny. And then I actually had these two, and then you can see the female's a little darker, a little more of a orange color, salmon color, and then the male is a little browner. And then I went out and caught some of the sounds through the years. So I'm gonna try to put this on so you can hear what the wood frogs sound like. Now they sound to me like ducks. And you're also gonna hear spring peepers on here, which are that really high pitched. So you have to listen to that deeper sound when I put it on. So let me click that and see if it works. Yeah. So they're that cluck, 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 that noise, are the wood frogs. Okay, I think you get the idea. All right. Wood frogs are also pretty cool because they can freeze. Their whole body, their body systems can freeze. So that's why they can be one of the first ones out right after this thaw. So their bodies freeze like that. It has antifreeze in them. So biologists and herpetologists are very interested in how that can happen, because what if we could someday do that to humans? And the biggest, oh, let me go on. Next slide. Next big explosive migrators are the spotted salamanders. So this is the biggest amount of the type of amphibian that comes out is the spotted salamander. So got lots of pictures. This is a whole bucket full. It looks like snakes or something. And then this little guy looked like he was smiling. And then this one we found later in the year in our window well. So must have fallen in or was just living there, but I didn't know how it would get out. So got it and made it, took some daytime pictures, which I hardly ever get. Spotted salamanders have no sound, so there's no sound on this slide. They are an average size, so, I mean, that's my hand in the picture. So my hand's not real big, but it's not small either. So that guy, finding him, I had never, when growing up, we'd always seen those redback salamanders that you find under rocks, and they're, I don't know, 3-4 inches long. So those were the only salamanders that I had ever seen. So seeing these that very first year we lived here, it was just amazing, and I couldn't believe how big they were and how many were coming across. They are the ones that can travel half a mile. They return to the same place. So we want to make sure that that vernal pool is healthy and stays there, because they like to return to the same place where they were born to breed again. All right. Here's the third one, the Jefferson salamanders. Now these guys are a little rare. They can come out first. They actually come out, this picture over here on the right-hand side was taken, he's on the snow. So they come before the wood frogs. They do come with this explosive migration, but they also come a little, like a few weeks earlier. I don't know how they find their way up, but they must be able to get out of their little burrows and make their way up, because they are the first ones out. And they're beautiful. They're like a gray, and it looks like someone just took glitter or sparkles and just sprinkled it across their body. So they're really cool to find, and we don't find too many. I think it's hard to explain this, but they are not found from North Coventry to Philadelphia. So North Coventry is the closest place west that they're found. It's hard to describe. So they're the furthest, our area is the furthest east that they have been found. And then the further west you go, you can find more. Let me see, what else did I want to say about these guys? So they're like the golden ticket. If we find a Jefferson, we all yell and get excited because there aren't many of them, and we want to make sure that they stay healthy and live. Next slide is why we want to help them. Why help these amphibians and help cross them? The number of amphibians around the world is dwindling from climate change, deforestation. I mean, we build a house right here. Luckily, our builder built the house as far away from the vernal pool as possible, but still we're part of that deforestation too. There are more vehicles, more people on the road. We're taking our kids, well, not right now during the pandemic, but usually it's pretty crowded out there on the road. And neighbors have told me that in the past, the roads, there were so many frogs and salamanders that the road itself looked like it was moving. So there are older neighbors around who said that there was a lot more and that the numbers have decreased over the years. So a spotted salamander can live to be 20 years old. So if one salamander gets squished out there, that's my scientific term, squished. If one salamander gets squished, that's 20 years that it won't be able to breed or come back to the vernal pool. A wood frog can live 3 years, and a Jefferson can live 6 years. And all three of these are good indicators of a healthy environment, but the Jefferson is really an indicator of healthy vernal pool, healthy environment. Okay, other hidden amphibians in North Coventry. So these are amphibians that did not come with the explosive migrators. Now I said that this big explosive migration happens the end of February and the beginning of March, but if it goes on, like say we don't get a thaw, we have a late thaw, maybe we don't get a thaw till the end of March, we'll get some of these other amphibians coming too because they've had time to come out, and then they come at the same time as the big top three. So this is the gray tree frog. I took this picture last week when it was raining and he was stuck to my garage door. So the gray tree frog is a frog. And when we first moved in here, we could hear them in the trees. And I thought it was some kind of nocturnal bird or something because of the sound they make. So I did go around and catch the gray tree frog sound. It took a while before I realized it was a frog making that noise. It's kind of faint, but you can hear it, a little trilling. And you also hear them right before it rains and during a rain if you're out there. But they seem to, you can kind of predict when the rain is going to come from them. Our next friend is the spring peeper, which everyone has heard. Neither of these are my pictures because they are tiny little guys. They're maybe ½ an inch, and they are the exact same color as macadam on the road. So they are really hard to spot, but they have this X on their back. So that's how I can tell where they are. And here you can see on someone's thumb just how small he is. Right, spring peepers. Oh, I'll put the sound on for you. Now the spring peepers were also on the wood frog sound, that they were the real high pitched one. So this is just another recording with more spring peepers than wood frogs, but you can still hear the wood frogs in this one too. So you can still hear that cluck, cluck, cluck of the wood frog and then the higher pitch of the spring peeper. I love hearing this sound, especially after the volunteers have been out. I can open my window, which is facing the vernal pool, and just listen to the sounds, and it's just such a comforting noise.
And spring peepers on March 1st, 2000.
Don't need that anymore. Forgot I recorded on there. All right. Next are the green frogs. All right, so the green frogs are the most common frogs that we have right now in the summer. And we have seem to be the most numerous. We have a problem this year because I told you that the vernal pool did not dry up in the last 3 years. So what happens is these green frogs, and also bullfrogs, but we've only found one bullfrog, so I'm not concerned that they're bullfrogs. The green frog tadpole can live in the vernal pool as a tadpole over the winter. So this year in March, we saw, a lot. I don't know, hundreds of their tadpoles. I don't have any pictures of their tadpoles. This is a juvenile green frog that we found in the summertime. But what happened was, because they were tadpoles and they were there, the tadpoles were already in the vernal pool when the wood frogs and salamanders came to lay their eggs. The tadpoles are ravenous and eat anything. I think they have been eating the eggs of the wood frogs and salamanders, because I did not see any eggs. And I know there's a vernal pool in French Creek State Park that I visit, and I did see eggs, and we did cross, the volunteers crossed many wood frogs. So I think that these guys might be a problem. So I'm kind of fingers crossed, hoping for a dry summer. And this is what they sound like, well, end of summer. So they kind of sound like a banjo being plucked. And this was in the daytime just a few weeks ago. And these little juveniles we found all over the vernal pool and the cattails. When we were hoping it would dry up, I kept going out to look, and we saw these little guys everywhere and realized that they were the tadpoles that we had seen in March. They were all, you know, metamorphing, I think, into their little green frogs, and just going everywhere. The kids had dug a hole in the backyard because they were bored. Why not dig a hole in your backyard in the woods? And they were, after it rained, they counted 10 or 12 of them that had just come from the vernal pool and hopped into their puddle. So these guys don't need the vernal pool. They just need any kind of water to lay their eggs. So they are the most common. All right, next, a few more hidden frogs and salamanders. Oh, the tadpoles, let me talk about the green frogs in a little more. They're pretty big. They're about 2.5 to 3 inches big. So you get 100 of them in your vernal pool, and they're eating ravenously, and that's what happens. I think that's my theory. All right, a few more hidden frogs and salamanders. We've got the bullfrog, and we only found this guy, so that's good, because they also overwinter, and bullfrogs love eating other frogs. So we don't want him in our vernal pool. And we usually don't, because it does dry out periodically. The red spotted newt is so beautiful when they're change into they're called the red F stage of their life cycle. So they start out in the vernal pool and they're like a green brown. Then they come out and they travel all over. We found this guy up in the Coventry woods on one of the trails. And then they come back to the water to lay their eggs, and they turn green and get a gill on their, or a fin on their tail. So they're pretty neat. This is a pickerel frog. Pickerel frogs sound like you're taking a comb and just kind of taking your thumb and running it down the comb. And we did find him in the vernal pool. This guy, I am not positive what he is. He was found last year, and at first I thought it was a Jefferson salamander because it's about the same color and it even had some dots on it, but it was long and skinny, almost snake-like. So I took some pictures of it, but I think it might be just a redback salamander that found its way over to the vernal pool, or I also did some research and found it could have been a Whorls. So I do have some places that you can do some more research if you want at the end of the slides. All right, another amphibian friend that comes to migrate are the American toads. And they come later in the year, and they usually come, the toads seem to all come at the same time, just them. It must be toad time. And you see a lot of crossing. I think it's Roxborough, Conshohocken. They have like a big toad crossing where they help the toads across the road. But the toads have when they lay their eggs, it looks like a long, transparent shoestring with little black circles in it. So they're pretty neat on the nights they come out. All right, that's all I had to say about the toads. Okay, so if you have children and you're watching the webinar, you might want to cover their eyes because I took this picture. There's a lot of this that goes on, unfortunately, even when the volunteers are out. So during an average year, I think this one was from 2017 that I pulled this up, And I say average, but there is never an average year. Sometimes there's a drought, sometimes we don't get a thaw until late, so there's never an average, never a normal. So these are the amounts of amphibians that the volunteers help cross. So 210 wood frogs, 293 spotted salamanders, 5 Jeffersons, so you can see the difference in the amounts. And then this year in 2017, there were also spring peepers and American toads. And then I try to put the casualties, so 25 wood frogs, 7 spotted salamanders, and 2 spring peepers. How we got to 2 spring peepers, I don't know, because they're so tiny and they really do match the macadam there. Oh, and I wanted to say I've also seen a slimy salamander, not in our vernal pool, but up in the Coventry woods under a rock, which was pretty neat. I thought it was a marbled salamander, which we haven't seen, which are mole salamanders also. Oh, and down in French Creek State Park, they have a 4-toed salamander, which I have never been able to go and see because I'm always watching our site, and they must be explosive, come at that explosive migration time too. So the 4-toed you can find down in the French Creek State Park, same kind of, the same weather conditions have to be cold, rainy, wet. All right, so a big thank you. North Coventry Township for letting us close Wells Road so that the kids can stay on Wells Road and help. So usually the grown-ups will do all the work on St. Peter's Road because we can't stop traffic on St. Peter's Road because that is a PennDOT road. So the kids can take our buckets or whatever we're collecting the amphibians in if you were volunteering, and they can take them to the vernal pool, dump them in, come back out, put a bucket down, and they like to do that. So I always like to thank North Coventry. Every year I go before them in January usually and ask permission to shut down Wells Road, and I've gotten it all these 13 years. So thank you to them. Thank you to the North Coventry Police because they not only support us, but they supply us with cones. They give me, well, let me borrow the nice little cones that I can handle and some barriers so that people know not to come through. And I wanted to thank all the volunteers who've already helped. I think we're up to 120 amphibian friend volunteers on the email chain list. That doesn't mean that's how many come out. I'd say we get 25 people if I call it right, which I've got to say is very hard because, like I said before, the conditions have to be perfect. So I'm watching the Weather Channel constantly in February, March, and sometimes into early April, just watching to see. And then I'm working during the day. At lunchtime, I try to get an email out and guess, is there going to be enough rain? Is it going to be warm enough? Oh, and then I can pick the time because I can tell 20 minutes after sunset. So if you wanted to sign up to be an amphibian friend, just know that you will get a lot of emails, and there's only 3 or 4 nights that it's actually going to happen. So a lot of people may get sick of all those emails at that time. And I'd like to thank all the neighbors who drive slowly on those cold, rainy nights in February and March. I put a little sign out warning people that it's almost time and that to, if it's a dark night, to be careful. All right, if you wanted to volunteer, this is what you would bring and this is what you would do. So you would come dressed for the weather. So I have been out there when it's so cold that my hands actually swell by the time I come in. And we stay out from 20 minutes after sunset until the traffic stops. So it's usually about 9:30-ish, depending on what time, whether it's daylight savings or not. So it's until about 9:30. You can wrap it up whenever you want if you're a volunteer. You need to bring a flashlight. You need to bring a plastic bucket because metal buckets, you don't want your amphibian friends sticking to your metal buckets. You want to make sure you have no cream, hands, anything on your hands so that it doesn't hurt their sensitive skin. You don't want to use an umbrella, so headlamps are best and raincoats because you need your hands free. You need a bucket in one hand, you need to scoop with the other, and then we take them to the other side of the road. And what the amphibians, the friends do, the volunteers do, is if I have enough people to help, I'll assign like sections of the road. And then we call, I know this sounds silly, but I've tried walkie-talkies and I've tried different things, but who's ever on the south side of St. Peter's Road and whoever's the furthest on the north side just calls out when a car is coming. Everyone else, it's like whisper down the lane, car, you pick up what you can get. So we try to just watch them and not move them if we don't have to. But if a car comes, you scoop them up, get them off the road, and then all the volunteers get to the side of the road, and hopefully people slow down, seeing the police barriers and the cones up around us. But sometimes they don't slow down. So it can be a little bit dangerous too. All right, after learning so much about the hidden lives of North Coventry's frogs and salamanders, you may want to get to know them close and personal too. So on this slide, we have some crazy woman kissing a frog. I don't know if she really likes amphibians or if she wanted a prince, but we also have these cute boys when they were darling and wanted to help, and one of our neighbors, which I just thought was cute. So during the day in the vernal pool, you can see the eggs and you can see the tadpoles. So it's really neat to just come up and listen to what's going on in the vernal pool and see it. All right, and here is my email address. So if you wanted to sign up after hearing all about the pleasant weather conditions, you could just email me and I would put you on the amphibian friends list. I usually send out a newsletter beginning of February and just go through what you need to do and what you might see. I also have all the volunteers keep a tally in their heads, just a ballpark tally. So when they get finished volunteering for the night, I can write down what they saw. Sometimes we can tell when they're leaving, like after the second or third night, you might see 5 salamanders leaving and 5 coming in. So I might ask something like that. The salamanders are pretty interesting because they come separately, the males and females, which I won't get into now, but you can look into more. I also put down here 2 websites. Frogwatch has all the sounds and they're a little better recording, professional recordings. And then the Fish and Boat Commission has some really cool pictures of Pennsylvania amphibians. All right, so I guess I'm done presenting all my slides. Let me stop sharing. All right, John.
All right. Thank you, Kim. That was very informative, very enlightening and interesting. I can remember, many nights out on St. Peter's Road, many nights when it was miserably cold and wet. As you said, the salamanders and frogs, they want to migrate when the weather is the worst for us.
Yes,
it's just above freezing. It's after dark. It's raining. Nobody goes for a walk in those conditions.
No, and if you missed that, John is my neighbor. His property is close to French Creek State Park, so they all come right down through his yard and through his property to get across St. Peter's Road and into the vernal pool.
And we're always happy to help them get across, Kim. Now, we do have one question that has come in. So Carol asks, when learning how to be alert to these explosive migrations, is it best to go out in advance of every rain or every night around the 35 degrees? Or is it best to target more specifically and only select the absolute correct conditions within those 2 months?
Well, since I live here, if I think it's going to rain, I am on call every time I think it's going to rain once that first thaw hits. So I usually, when I send out the amphibian newsletter, the Amphibian Friends newsletter, I put my cell phone number on there. Now, cell reception up here in the boonies is hit and miss. So I will keep my phone with me. We used to have a landline and then my husband and the kids would watch the landline, but now it's just my cell phone. So I give you a idea of what I think can happen, and usually you can at least text me when I'm out there and say, hey, I live, I mean, we've had people coming out from an hour away, and I feel terrible when I've called them out thinking that something was going to happen, and then we all get out there and it just drizzles or nothing happens, even though the Weather Channel told us it was going to be a good night for it to happen. So I guess to answer the question, I'm out there and I'm observing everything.
Right. And I think it's important to point out to Carol that it's not merely the conditions, it's also very much the location. Right. So there needs to be a vernal pool nearby, into which they're migrating. And that's the case up here where we live. And I know, Kim, there are others around the area. You mentioned French Creek. Do you know of other vernal pools nearby?
I know there's another one just down the road from us on St. Peter's Road. That's a good hike into the woods, but that's another good spot. I only know because of the eggs. Like I said, I'm always right here at our site, so I never see what happens in the other sites. There's also, people have told me that on Harmonyville Road, there's another spot where they've seen salamanders and the wood frogs. And in West Vincent Township, they actually have a volunteer. Their EAC does a volunteer for the amphibians too. So they're on my list, so they listen to what I say, and then they try to get out there too, and they're able to shut, I think it's Hollow Road, they shut down for volunteers to come out on. But there are other sites around near vernal pools, and it could be toads that are crossing the roads when it's warmer and raining that can go to a pond. It's just that these salamanders are only going to use the vernal pool because there's no fish in them.
Right. Okay. And then at one of your last slides, you were going through the sort of the average data, how many each year. Does that go back to when you first moved in, like 13 or 15 years ago?
Well, from 2017 on, I used the computer, but I do have totals from 2000 back to 2008. So I guess that's when I started really keeping a tally. And the numbers are pretty consistent, if that was the next question. So I haven't really seen a big drop. Let me see if I just look through quickly. Yeah, well, in 2008, we did have 27 Jefferson Salamanders, and we had 5 in 2017. Wood frogs are about the same. Spotteds. So I guess we have seen looking at all the other data I have. Yeah, Jeffersons are up and down, but like I said, they also come early, so I'm not always looking out for them because they seem to be able to come up before the spotted salamanders and the wood frogs, like a few weeks before they sneak in. So we do see them at the same time, but they somehow get in there a little earlier. Maybe they can move in the fog. I'm not sure. I'd have to find out from a herpetologist.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, at this point, we don't have any other questions, so I will just, I guess, say thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Kim, thank you so much for presenting this. This is, all the years that I've helped you with the crossings, I still learned a lot tonight, and I really appreciate that. I guess I will just say thank you to you for presenting this, and thanks to everyone who tuned in. And encourage everyone to tune in about a month from now, and we'll have hawk identification for beginners from Vince Smith.
All right, thank you. Thanks for watching. I hope that was educational and entertaining, and you've learned about the hidden lives of what's going on out there in the dark and the rain when you're in bed, nice and warm.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Well done.
Thanks, Kim. Good job.
You're welcome. Thank you.